Welcome everyone to the 6th Annual General Meeting of the Canadian Business History Association. My name is Dimitri Anastakis, and I have the pleasure of acting as a director of the organization, as I have for the past several years, and I am the founding chair and have returned to be chair again for the past couple of years. This year, our annual general meeting and special panel of speakers are being presented online, obviously, because of the COVID pandemic. As a result, I would like to outline some online procedures to follow. I would please ask that everyone keeps their microphones muted throughout the presentation, but obviously you're welcome to chime in. If you have a question to ask, you can do so through the chat. And since we're a small group, potentially when our presentation happens, you can also raise your hand. For voting, in terms of the AGM, we previously asked that you submit your voting preferences by proxy. We have indeed received a great number of proxies for this purpose. Only if you did not submit a proxy and you wish to register your vote, please use the chat function. We will note your voting preference. And you can also additionally raise your hand by tapping on a reaction. On today's agenda, we first have a set of formal business items to attend to, all of which is the basis of the governance of the organization. We'll be reporting on its membership. We'll have a report on the financial condition of the organization. And following addressing of the formal items and some voting, we will be having a short break. And then we will hear a talk from a fascinating panel of experts on the history of business and philanthropy. And I think that that's going to be really quite interesting. I hope everyone stays for that, because that's really one of the things that the organization does, bring people together to have these interesting talks. But first, let's pay attention to the formal business items that we must attend to as part of our AGM. At this juncture, I'd like to call upon the Secretary Treasurer of the CBHA, the ACHA, Mr. Mark Bonham, to provide his report on the requirement that proper notice has been given to the members and a necessary quorum is present to conduct the business of the meeting.
Well, thank you, Dimitri. As Secretary Treasurer of the CBHA-ACHA, I hereby confirm that the proper notice of this meeting pursuant to bylaw number 1, section 10.04, that being 21 days notice, has been provided to all members. I also hereby confirm that the form of notice pursuant to bylaw number 1, section 12 has also been met. I also confirm that the requirement under bylaw number 1, section 10.01, that an annual general meeting be held has now been met by the conducting of this meeting. I also confirm that pursuant to bylaw number 1, section 10.10, a quorum is present at this meeting in person or by proxy, and to properly conduct the affairs of the meeting, and that the meeting may now proceed.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. It's now my great pleasure to introduce the president of our organization to provide an address and some comments on the past year's activities. And I'd like to introduce Joe Martin. Amongst his many activities, he is the former director of the Canadian Business and Financial History Initiative at the Rotman School of Management at the University of Toronto, and I'm lucky enough to come and succeed him to some degree. He's also the President Emeritus of Canada's History Society. Joe has a long history in being involved in historical associational work and in research, including writing a number of important books and articles. His historical research is focused on the development of case studies, primarily on one hand, about Canadian business in a global context, including his best-selling case book, A Relentless Change, which I just finished an MBA class where we were talking about one of the cases from Relentless Change, and 43 students in that course were very much enjoying that case on the HBC. Joe has also, there's a copy of it that Jim is showing off there as well. Joe has also published a well-received book, which he co-wrote with Chris Kobrak, comparing the Canadian and American financial systems from the late 18th century to 2008, from Wall Street to Bay Street. I got to get the order correct. It is my pleasure to introduce President Joe Martin. Please go ahead now, Joe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have been in my long life involved in many organizations in both the public, private, and not-for-profit sectors, including chairing 2 Toronto Stock Exchange listed companies. I don't think I've ever got into a meeting in a more positive mood, an annual general meeting. What a year. What a year. Let me tell you what we've done and what we're going to do. We've had a successful 5 years. You know that last year marked our 5th anniversary of existence. That is not a small achievement, especially given the environment we were in with COVID, et cetera. But you, the members of the board of directors and the executive all made it happen. And to quote, we're involved in a legacy project. And I'd like to quote one of my favorite Americans, Lin-Manuel Miranda, legacy. What is a legacy? It's planting seeds in a garden you never get to see. He went on, we're all gamblers in the narrow margin of the universe we call Earth, where the stakes are existence, some measure of happiness, and a lively struggle, interest in the struggle. So I would summarize us as we've survived, we are happy, and we're enjoying the struggle to place business history where it belongs, front and center in the Canadian history community, front and center in the Canadian business community. Let's remember some of our past achievements before we look to the future. When I was on the founding board of Canada's History Society, and I was there from year 1, you know, it's tough in the early years. And so I came up with the analogy, being a parent of age. And I thought of my age of my children as they grew up and how they matured. And that was very helpful because, but I have to say, I never envisaged that the Canada's History Society would become what it is today. And every time I go to one of their functions at Rideau Hall, I'm amazed that this is something we started. So great things can happen. And I'd like to take the analogy one step further, because when I'm the historian of the Albany Club of Toronto, and when I began the series of historical talks, initially I thought I started in 1882 when the club was founded. But no, if you don't know what went on before, how can you start with that? So we've had a gestation period, I would say comparable to an elephant, somewhere between 15 and 22 months. And it all began with the most incredible guy, not a Canadian, but definitely a business historian. And Chris Kobrak got to know Mark and Dimitri and I, and starting in the spring of 2015, we started talking. And Chris had this vision, this image that we should found a Canadian Business History Association. Nothing like it in the United States. We certainly have seen evidence of it in countries like Sweden and Germany, but nothing like it in the United States. So, excuse me for 1 second here. Dimitri taught me a couple of tricks last week, and I don't know if I can remember them. So, Chris was, in case you didn't know it, the first holder of the Wilson Curry Chair of Canadian Business History at the Rotman School of Management. And working with Chris, Dimitri, and Mark, we talked to people. One of my roles was to talk to potential funders. And I was thinking of approaching the banks and asking them for $10,000 each. And at that time, Richard Nesbitt, former Chief Operating Officer of the Bank of Commerce and former CEO of the Toronto Stock Exchange, was on faculty at Rutland. And I said, I'm thinking of going to the banks and asking for $10,000. And Chris said, Joe, any CEO of a bank will give you $10,000 as long as he doesn't have to see you. And so that helped us get started, and we made good inroads there. And we talked to archivists, historians, and while centered in Toronto, we did travel a bit. Remember, we had no operating budget, but we did get to Ottawa and Winnipeg and met with people there and talked to them. So on October 1st, 2016, our association was born, a baby, but a big baby with a great growth potential. We wanted Chris to be chair, wouldn't do it, had to be a Canadian. So Dimitri became chair for the first time. Little did we know at that time that Dimitri would be the second holder of the Wilson Currie chair, but that's the way the world works. Mark became the secretary treasurer, and I assumed the role of president. What did we do in the first 5 years? Well, I've really got to summarize because we don't have that much time. We began with a partnership, holding a conference. The partner was the Leverhulme Trust from the University of Kent in England. I happened to be in the United Kingdom, and I met with their representative at the East India Club. And for them, it was quite an experiment because they had been to India and to Washington, but never to Canada. We were the only third conference outside of the United Kingdom. And that was the beginning of our conferences. We had 3 more conferences after that, including one in Montreal at McGill. And we're planning on going to Winnipeg in the fall of 2021 or 20. I get my years mixed up now with COVID. And we had to stop because of COVID. But as Toynbee said, Al, every challenge results in a response. And our very creative secretary treasurer said, well, why don't we organize talks like TED Talks, only these will be CBH talks. So that's what we did. And I think it's safe to say that we've had a great response and we've reached out further. In addition to that, and by the way, if you've missed any of the talks, we have our own YouTube channel. One of my American friends down in Florida phoned me apologetically because she had to miss one of the talks. I said, check it out on YouTube. And she was surprised we had a YouTube channel. So what else did we do? We've provided grants, scholarships, and sponsorships to advance the study of business history. We have provided 3 best business history book awards, the last 2 being worth $10,000 each. We've introduced a business history article and awarded it. We've held events where outstanding Canadian personalities have delivered talks to our members. We've been fortunate in our charter corporate members. All the banks except RBC, HBHF, Redpath, Deloitte, Heathbridge Capital, and Black & McDonald. We're fortunate in having you from ground zero. We now have more than 200 members. And you're quite a group. You come in Canada from Prince Edward Island to British Columbia, from half a dozen states of the Union, from Australia and the United Kingdom, individuals like Margaret Bencarn, the archivist at CIBC, Emily Bucknia, a Canadian teaching at the University of Newcastle in the United Kingdom, John Bragg, a businessman in Oxford, Nova Scotia, and Randy Allen teaching at Cornell. We have a dedicated board. You know the current board, and I would like to draw special attention to Stephen Salmon, our book editor, because as a guy who loves books, I think our book reviews are simply outstanding and a joy to read. And we should not forget the contribution of earlier board members, and that of course includes Chris, Amy Korchinski from the Toronto Dominion Bank, who took maternity leave as she delivered 2 bouncing baby boys, and Andrew Smith from the Liverpool School of Management. And note, we've already started the renewal process. As you can see, at least 3 or 4 or 5 names that weren't there at the beginning. And finally, I would like to thank our chairs, plural. Dimitri is our first and third chair. He stepped down briefly because of health issues, and his place was admirably taken by Janice Thiessen from the University of Winnipeg. Janice, you may have noticed, is one of the co-winners of our first award for the best article. And we hope to see Janice in the fall with a conference in Winnipeg, depending on COVID. And who can say enough good things about Mark Bonham, our peerless secretary treasurer? We now have 1,600 subscribers to the monthly newsletter. And what has fascinated me is the newsletter comes out on time regularly. Not a small achievement. We have up to 10,000 unique visits to the website. I won't say anything about myself other than that I have been a bit disappointed and not doing better on the corporate funding front. And that's been my responsibility, and I feel I've let the organization down, but hopefully we can do better. I cannot leave the past without saying a word, not only about the loss of Chris, but the loss of Michael Bliss. For guys as old as me in the business community, Michael Bliss is Canadian business history. And I'd like to report to you, if you did not know that his business history collection is the foundation of a business history collection at the Rotman School and their library. And the widow of Bob McIntosh, who was for many years the CEO of the Canadian Bankers Association, has been in touch with me, and will have some more books to give to that collection. Now, the future. Enough of patting ourselves in the back. What are we going to do next? Well, last April, 6 months before the end of the fiscal year, the board, and I'm talking about the board, started talking about we need to have a retreat, a strategic retreat. Then guess what happened over the summer? We received a phone call from the Wilson Foundation in Oakville. And they indicated to us that they were in the process of winding up their foundation. And they wanted to give us $1 million immediately for us to continue to do our good work. $1 million. You know, we tend to travel by subway or walk rather than taking cabs because we're very conscious of cost. So that was quite a thing. Then they continued and said, furthermore, if you have the ability to raise $1 million before the end of June 2022, we'll give you another $1 million. So we're about a quarter of the way there. We've got a couple of excellent proposals outstanding, and Mark and I are very confident that we will achieve the goal of $1 million by June 30th. But if any of you have ideas, Mark and I would love to hear from you. And because you can never have too many prospects when you're looking for that much money. But think about it. I looked at our financial statements for the year just passed and the year before. The year before, our net assets were $7,800. $7,800. This year, they were over $1 million. That's a 13-fold increase. And there's not very often in this life that one ever gets a 13-fold increase in net assets. Needless to say, this incredible gift changed the way we were going to have our strategic retreat. It's a lot different planning strategically for the future if you got net assets of 8,500 than if you got over 1 million. So I called on my longtime partner, Sandy Aird, who's one of Canada's leading strategy consultants, and he met with us, with the executive, Mark, Dimitri, and I, and also Roz McLean, a member, and we worked hard in putting together something that would facilitate discussion with the board of directors. And in December, we had an offsite retreat on a Saturday where we discussed this. Now, if I just get this thing down. So the board really did well. I was very proud of them. Dimitri did a great job in the chair. I won't go into the details of the strategic direction, but rather deal with a strategic direction itself. As you all know, our mission statement was to preserve, that's the archival function, and to present the business history function. But what we decided is we've got to do more than to preserve and to present. We have to engage, because business history has not had its proper place either in business or in history. Let me just give you a brief example of that. Last year marked the sesquicentennial of the Canadian Bank Act. I put a lot of effort into recognizing that important date because Canada has one of the finest banking systems in the world. And you see that all you have to do is go online, and Canada over the years has consistently listed in the top 5 to 10 banks in the world, banking systems. So I thought, well, gee, that's worth recognizing. And so we arranged to have somebody make a motion at Queen's Park. Happened to be my daughter-in-law. I did not have the same influence at the House of Commons. We organized 5 panel discussions, one of them in Winnipeg. And I wrote an article on a serious article on this topic, which unfortunately I couldn't get published in Canada, but was able to get it published on Wall Street. In the process of doing this, I had a very senior student go through history books as far back as George Wrong and A.R.M. Lower to the present. I gave them specific questions I wanted to have them ask about in each of those books. For example, did they recognize that when the Fathers of Confederation met in Charlottetown, Quebec City, and London, they made a decision that unlike the United States, banking would be a federal responsibility. Well, needless to say, what we found was pretty disappointing. In fact, it was abysmal. And you look at a comparable American text, and I'm talking about general history, I'm not talking about business. There's all kinds of references to this fundamental topic of any society. So that is something that I was concerned about. So in conclusion, all this in the midst of COVID, Trump, not to mention Putin and Xi Jinping, a benefit of COVID has been that, like many others I found, I finally read War and Peace. Toynbee's incredible description of the war with Napoleon. And here is a quote: "Real life with its essential interests of health and sickness, toil and rest, and its intellectual interests in thought, science, poetry, music, love, friendship, hatred, and passions, went on as usual. Well, things went on as usual here too. And so it was with us. The Canadian Business History Association is now part of real life and will be. We can look forward to the next 5 years with confidence and hope that business history will take its rightful place in the minds of business leaders and the minds of all Canadian historians. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. It's great to get such positive thoughts from the president, and to have such a great outline of not just the past of what we've done, but where we're at now and where we're going in the future. So thank you. It's been great to work with you and Mark over this, and especially during the last little while, especially during COVID. So I do want to thank you for that. At this juncture, it's now time to consider our first set of motions for the meeting, the election of directors of the CBHA-ACHA. Under the bylaws of the corporation, directors are elected to 3-year rotating terms. As such, in this 6th annual meeting of shareholders, there are a set of directors to be elected with a 3-year term. The motion to be put forward to the meeting, is that the following directors be elected to a 3-year term: Joe Martin, Andrew Ross, and Mona Zhang. The biographies of these individuals were provided in the meeting material forwarded to all members with the notice of this meeting. Can I now ask for a member to move that this motion be presented? And a show of hands would be sufficient. Thank you, Mark. Mark Adler has moved the motion. Is there a seconder for the motion? Thank you, Tabitha. Are there any questions or discussion on the motion for these 3-year terms? Okay, if not, I will call the vote in on the motion. All those in favor can raise their hands physically, digitally, or otherwise. And I will see 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, thank you all. Thank you. All those opposed? And Lynn, I've noted that your hand is just there, but it was from the previous vote. So, well, by my count, the ayes have it and the motion is carried. Welcome to those members for their new 3-year terms, and to Mona, who is joining the board for the first of time. Great, thank you, congratulations. We now turn our attention to the financial affairs of the organization. For this, I will ask our Secretary Treasurer, Mark Bonham, to provide his report. Mark, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Dimitri, and I will just share a screen here to bring the financial reports up. There we have it. In reviewing the financial statements of the CBHA at this time, please remember that these are 12-month reviewed reports to September 30th, 2021, with a comparison to the same period in 2020. Both years were fully impacted by the global COVID health pandemic and its attendant social distancing and public meeting restrictions. Of course, without a doubt, this global health pandemic continues to materially affect the financial affairs of the organization, as it did all nonprofit organizations. Despite this challenge, it gives me great pleasure to state that your board and management was able to adapt very proficiently to the situation, to the extent that there has been no material negative financial impact on the CBHA-ACHA to this time. My comments will include references to this unusual event. The independently reviewed financial statements were provided to members prior to the meeting in the form of this annual report, and that's the copy that's showing here on the screen. Revenues of the organization come from membership fees, conference income, and book sales. Despite the pandemic, membership fees increased in fiscal 2021 to $20,000 and $20,075, compared to $19,275 in fiscal 2020. The pandemic and restrictions on global travel meant that there was no conference income for 2021 or 2020. A very small amount of revenue is earned from book sales and investment income. What is materially different in 2021 was the creation of the CBHA-ACHA Scholarship and Awards Endowment Fund, for which $14,306 was contributed by members in the year, compared to nil in the previous year. This is a perpetual endowed funding, and only the income can be spent from that endowment. Expenses of the organization to September 30th, 2021, can be broken down into 4 principal areas: the organizational expenses incurred in operating the organization, the expenses of holding an annual conference, the costs associated with printing the conference book, and grants, scholarships, and awards to members. In the first category, the principal expenses related to managing the organization's website, its membership, and other communication activities such as the newsletter, etc. The costs associated with the ongoing promotion of the organization, and daily administrative tasks. These organizational expenses totaled $9,073 in 2021, which was a dramatic decline from $12,714 in 2020, which in itself was a dramatic decline from 2019. Of course, all that large reduction can be attributed principally to less administrative activity as a result of the COVID shutdown. The organization, as I mentioned, created a scholarships and awards committee, which solicits application from members and presents such awards. This committee has set a criteria for the awarding of research grants, travel grants, and other scholarship grants for members, including an appropriate application form and review procedure. However, with the global pandemic, most academic conferences and events were canceled or moved to an online virtual basis. So grant applications continued to be quite low this year, and grants awarded were $15,500 in 2021 compared to $5,500 in 2020. Now, a good part of that was due to the awarding of the biannual Best Book in Canadian Business History award. Turning to the balance sheet, which I'll just move to that next. One second. Just 1 second, and I'll fix that. Actually, I'll skip that. It's going to take too much time to bring that up. So, but looking at the balance sheet, the operations of the organization were financed from the revenues earned and the cash and investment balance. The board reviews the cash flow forecast for the organization on a regular basis to ensure the financial sustainability of the organization as a nonprofit. Of material significance this year is the increase in assets and net equity of the organization through the receipt of the Wilson Foundation endowment, which Joe mentioned. And of course, this dramatically changes the financial stability of the CBHA-ACHA in perpetuity. The nature of the endowment is such that the capital can never be spent, but rather it is the income that will be used to support the organization on a perpetual basis. The organization recorded a net profit for the year of approximately $19,333 compared to a net profit of $1,609 in 2020. Because the CBHA-ACHA is a nonprofit, membership-driven organization, its success depends almost entirely on its ability to retain that membership. Your management is dedicated to continue to grow that membership across all of its categories to ensure the long-term viability of the organization and the continued promotion of the study of Canadian business history. I'm very happy to answer any questions on the financials if you have them.
Are there any questions for Mark? Okay, thank you, Mark. That's great. Again, good positive news in terms of the financials of the association. I'd now like to table the following motion to the members: that the financial statements of the organization for the period ended September 30, 2021 are hereby accepted and approved. I will table the motion. Is there a seconder for the motion? Thank you, Jeremy. Are there any questions or discussion on the motion? Okay, if not, then I will call the question on the motion. All those in favor can indicate by raising their hand physically or by digitally doing so. Okay, thank you, thank you, thank you. Anyone opposed? And I'll let an opportunity for the hands to go down as well. Anyone opposed? The ayes have it, so the motion is carried. Moving forward, I would now like to table the following motion to members: that the organization reappoint Ms. Hema Murdoch, CA, as the review auditor for the 2021-2022 fiscal year. I have moved the motion. Is there a seconder for the motion? Thank you, Mark. Is there any question or discussion on the motion? If not, I will now call the question. All those in favor can indicate by raising their hand physically or digitally. Thank you, thank you. All those opposed? The motion is carried. At this juncture, as a board member and on behalf of the board, and especially on behalf of Mark and Joe, I would like to present a brief report on membership. In terms of our corporate membership, I'm happy to report that we have 11 large corporate members, including the following firms, and this is in order of them joining the organization. Our first large corporate group to join was TD Financial Group, Scotiabank, Canada Life Assurance Company, CIBC, the Bank of Montreal, the Hudson's Bay Company History Foundation, Deloitte, National Bank Financial, Repas Sugar, Black and McDonald. Thank you to those large corporations for continuing to support the organization. The small corporation member to date is Heathbridge Capital Management. Thanks to them. In terms of individual members, I'm very pleased to report that as of today, and Mark may correct me, we have a total of 201 individual members of the CBHA-ACHA. And this is a significant growth from 2019, where we had 148 members and 174 members in 2020. So during COVID, as both Joe and Mark have pointed out, we've been able to grow. These members are a mix of academics, scholars, archivists, corporate executives, students, and young scholars or archivists, and the general public. We have a very diverse group of members for an academic and public organization. The 2021 annual report represents a graphical breakdown of this membership, which shows a good geographic distribution and in terms of age of scholars, rank of scholars, and the type of people that are in our organization, from business leaders and senior scholars all the way to students and the general public. You can refer to that in your materials. I'm also particularly happy to report on a substantial increase in the number of subscribers to the CBHA monthly newsletter. Joe had mentioned 1,600 subscribers, but we are actually currently over 2,200 monthly subscribers compared to 1,600 in 2020. And again, with over 2,000 subscribers to our newsletter, obviously we're looking to convert a lot of those people who are subscribers to memberships, but it does show the tremendous interest in what the organization is contributing to the community. Both in terms of our membership and our newsletter, we see a growth in the organization, and I call on all members to continue to spread the word about the kinds of things that we are doing and to try to continue to grow our membership. I'd also like to take this moment to take just a few brief comments about the membership and what we have done and what we have planned for the organization, especially in the coming years. As Mark and Joe have both pointed out, and as we're all aware, we have faced some significant challenges in the last couple of years, especially with COVID. We had a number of initiatives that were to be in person that either were moved or moved online. But the CBHA continues to build its offerings and look towards the future. One of our most successful ventures in the last 2 years have been our very successful CBHA talks, and everyone on the board has contributed to those, and they have been pretty incredible in terms of the range and diversity of the kinds of discussions that we've had across the board. If you go to our YouTube channel, you can see some of those discussions. And we've had just in the last year about a dozen of these events, ranging on talks from railroad mergers, which have been in the news and have been historicized, to corporate family feuds, which we just did in December, which had some great turnout and was sparked by the recent blow up at the Rogers family. I encourage all members, if you weren't able to view one of those when we first did them, to visit the channel to view these events. I know how useful they are, and I make sure that my students know about them, because some of them are just fantastic mini discussions and lectures of some of the most important, engaging, and interesting issues in Canadian business history and their connections to history and to today. The CBHA also has planned, depending on the pandemic and what we have, for a fall conference in Winnipeg that will explore the 1920s in Canada, an appropriate topic, and one that has a lot of connections to today, that provides an opportunity to look at some of the parallels of the 1920s with the 2020s, and some of the fascinating and incredibly connected events, issues, and themes that we are going through today that they were going through a century ago. And just right off the top, we all know that there was an influenza pandemic in the period between 1918 and 1920 that the 20s were roaring in some measures. We were coming out of. Roaring or not, I should say. You'll be hearing more about this initiative soon. I also want to mention quickly that we have coming up just this year 2 of our scholarship opportunities and award opportunities, one of which is a new one that I'd like to mention to all members, which is the Desautels Research Fund in Private Enterprise History and Law, which is being funded by the Marcel Desautels Center for Private Enterprise and Law at the University of Manitoba, but being facilitated by the CBHA. And this is for anyone who's interested, who's doing projects and work upon any aspects of a Canadian family-controlled or otherwise private business that considers its intersections with the law. Of course, we also have our annual Chris Kobrak Fellowship, our Chris Kobrak Fellowship, and our annual Best Article Prize, which we launched last year, that also has an award of $1,000. The Desautels funding is for $1,000, whereas the Chris Kobrak Fellowship is for $10,000. Spread over 2 years. These are great scholarship and award opportunities that, if you know of a potential candidate, or if you yourself are interested, please make sure to get in touch. And you can just Google this if you are interested in doing so. I think my son is practicing piano right now, so you might hear that, just so you know. He's got amazing timing for a 13-year-old. As our association president, Joe, has already discussed, the board recently engaged in a longer-term planning exercise, which will result in a host of new initiatives and projects that will be rolling out in the next few years. I too would like to take a moment to recognize the incredible generosity of the Wilson Foundation and all of our other donors, all of our members, and our board members who make the work of the association possible in advancing the cause of business history in Canada. It's kind of an amazing thing for us to have been able to receive this endowment from the Wilson Foundation, which will enable us to continue doing all kinds of work going forward to advance the cause that we're all interested in. And at this juncture, I would also like to specifically thank and recognize the work of Joe Martin and Mark Bonham and our board colleagues in achieving this incredible milestone of the endowment, but also in achieving the milestone of moving into a 6th year for the organization. And, you know, we've kind of watched this organization grow, and it's been pretty fantastic. At this point, I'd like to open the floor to any general questions or comments from the members present. This is an opportunity for people to comment on all of the things that I've discussed, that Joe has discussed, that Mark have discussed. If not, if there aren't any comments, you can raise your hand to chime in or chat in the chat. If not, I'd like to conclude the formal business matters of the AGM. And we'll now take a short 10-minute break, opportunity for people to get some refreshments, whatever the case may be, run to the bathroom, whatever, after which we will be hearing from our distinguished panel on the topic of the history of business and philanthropy. It is now 4:50, and I will say that we should reconvene at 5 o'clock sharp to begin the presentation. I hope that everyone will stay for the presentation, and of course that others will join. With that, I will pause at this juncture, though I will stay online. If anybody would like to directly chat, they may do so. Otherwise, we will reconvene in approximately 9 minutes. Thank you.